Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Jack Hanlon. Jack is the Global Head of Data at Reddit. Jack, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, JP.
It's our pleasure. Jack, let's start with yourself. You and I have obviously know each other a while now. You've got quite an interesting background. So can you talk us through your journey from where you first got started in technology, some of the roles you've held along the way, taking us up to just before you joined Reddit?
Sure. It's certainly been a bit of a non-linear path. You know, I think I see some people's careers and I see a really clear set of jumps where you can sort of construct the narrative in your head. And I think that I could look back at my own journey and see how it all makes sense in retrospect, you know, the sort of 2020 hindsight. But in reality, when I started and when I was in school, there wasn't a computer science major in my college. It was a minor as part of the math major. So I certainly wasn't actively choosing to go into data science or analytics. So, you know, then there's this journey too when you get out. So irrespective of the fact that I wasn't even going for that, there's this journey when you first get out of school where you're like, what am I good at? And I think you're starting to figure that out, you know, in college. But then you get into the world and it's, what am I good at relative to other people? So for example, in college, I might have said, something I'm good at is I was a music major, and something I'm good at is playing music. And then I got into the world. I'm like, what am I good at relative to other people? I'm pretty good playing music relative to other people. How many people in the world need to be good at this? And all of a sudden it's like, the competition's pretty high when you want to play orchestra pits and musicals and things like this. Or, I think I'm a pretty good communicator. Well, what am I good at relative to the world? There's amazing editors in the world, and there's not that many of them. So there's this sort of negotiation that happens between you and the world about how your skills fit in. So as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I ended up doing a little bit of everything, from product management to sales. I was in HR and I was in machine learning, and I ended up doing that a little bit of everywhere. So from Google to an environment and literacy driven startup to starting my own companies to the largest company in the world at Walmart. And I can tell you looking back that the thread that ties it all together is that my core interest is about understanding how people make decisions and improving the speed and quality of those decisions to create value for users or partners or clients or whatever. And I started particularly interested in how technology and data interact in that space to change that decision-making process, to improve that decision-making process. But over time, I realized that all these problems at their heart are people problems, and technology doesn't solve people problems on its own. And so I can tell you with a straight face that what connects me working at a construction company in Ireland to help build Pfizer's headquarters, to doing healthcare consulting for senior living communities in Massachusetts, through to what I do today at Reddit, is this idea of how do we improve the speed and quality of decisions that get made. But realistically, in the moment, I had no plan. I can tell you this thing and make it really compact, and I could have ended the answer there, and maybe that would have been cool. But the reality is I didn't have a plan. Ultimately, I've gotten really good at trusting my gut. And so the real guiding factor for me was seeing opportunities and meeting people and trying to create opportunities wherever I could. And despite not really knowing what they would look like, having the courage to say yes, and then trying to make some magic in those roles and sometimes succeed and sometimes fail, but learn a lot about myself and learn a lot about different parts of different companies and different industries. So ultimately, it's the sum of those moments that make me effective today, not because I'm the greatest data leader in the world or something, but rather because I can now speak the language of people on other teams. I can understand their desires and their incentives because in many cases I've sort of been those people. And so the path, there's the constructed story and then there's the real story. And I wouldn't change anything about that story, but it certainly was non-traditional, let's say.
Thank you for that. I think that's one of the most important and helpful introductions we've had on the podcast today, because it's so raw and honest, and you've talked about the reality of your journey not being defined, not having a plan, but having this. When you look back retroactively, you see the underlying thread, but a lot of it was down to following your gut, acknowledging the fact that you weren't certain, and stepping outside your comfort zone, taking on new challenges because you found them interesting. I think there's a lot of value to be had in that approach. And look, it served you well despite challenges along the way. Here you are as the chief data officer for one of the biggest social media companies in the world. So it's evidence to many that your path doesn't need to be predefined, and you can enter into many opportunities without certainty if it's the right fit.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you told me 10 years ago about the position I'd be in, if you told me 5 years ago about the position I'd be in, I think I'd really struggle to believe you there. But now looking back, you can be like, well, of course I'm here. Of course I'm the right person for this position. But at the time, yeah, your assessment's absolutely right, which doesn't surprise me. You've talked to a lot of people about their own journeys, JP.
Yeah, but it doesn't get old, so thank
Yeah.
you. So now you're at Reddit, global head of data. So look, you've been kind enough to talk to me in detail about what your role entails, but more importantly, what's happening behind the scenes. So please give us some insight. Tell everyone who's listening, first and foremost, for anyone who may be listening for some reason doesn't know who Reddit are, give your overview, but then talk us through the data team, what's been happening today, and what your mission is.
Sure. So Reddit is about 450 million monthly active users come to Reddit, and our objective is to bring community and belonging to the world. And the way that manifests is Reddit is a collection of hundreds of thousands of what we call subreddits that are communities focused around certain topics of interest. Those subreddits are started by anyone. You could go on today and start a community about anything. They grow organically. Some of them have many millions of people who go every single day. Some of the famous ones are AMA, Ask Me Anything. That has actually become a term that's used more broadly, but that term comes originally from its use on Reddit. And so the AMA community has had a wide variety of celebrities over the years, including people like Obama leading up to the election did one. And so we have a spread all the way from that all the way through to more obscure communities for things like vintage obscura records from over 25 years ago, where people share new songs every day. There's a really wide variety of interests. Anything you could be interested in, you can find it in a subreddit. In terms of what the data team does there, we have 4 pillars within Data IRL. Data IRL is how our org name, and incidentally is also a subreddit, so it's an homage. But our 4 pillars are data science, data platform, core ML, and search and feeds. So briefly, data science, how do we make great decisions? How do we enable people to make great decisions across our whole organization by using all the tools at our disposal to do so? Data platform, how do we collect, transport, and create access to data throughout our whole organization? And so that'd be data infra, data engineering, BI tools, experimentation platform, privacy and governance, and instrumentation are the teams there. Then core ML is about how do we do content understanding, user modeling, the fundamental base blocks that other teams will need to build data-powered tools and data-powered products on top of. How do we create a common understanding across these things? And then search and feeds is one of the places that those things manifest. So the infrastructure, relevance, and experience on all Reddit feeds, which is the core Reddit experience, and on Reddit's search function.
Thank you for that. So Look, Reddit are a fast becoming household name, one of the largest social media platforms globally, and it continues to grow at an exponential pace. A lot of people will be completely unaware as to how lean the business has been and
Huh.
how you guys have got to this point operating with such a small team. So can you give us some insight into behind the scenes, what it looks like? You've talked about the four pillars, but
Yeah.
people may think that that's hundreds of people when in fact it's a really really small tight knit team. So can you
Yeah.
just talk us through the environments, what it is now, and then we can talk about what it's going to look like in the near term.
Yeah, absolutely. The team is leaner than I ever expected. I walked in on the first day a year ago and found, we're doing something like 40 billion events a day coming through our pipes, and we're scaling that number out actually significantly. So there's a lot more to be measured there, but we're doing about 40 billion events a day, which for most businesses is a considerably higher volume than people would have to deal with. And there was one person working on it. And so I realized, at first I thought I need to hire my leadership team. And I got there, I said, actually, I need to hire people to do these jobs. Leadership team has nobody to lead. I walked in, the data team at Reddit as a whole was maybe 15 or so people, maybe 20 people. And Reddit as a whole was only about 500. So amazing to think, 450 million monthly active users, 500 people, we're almost at a million users, we're almost not quite, right? But almost at a million users per employee, which is a ratio that is pretty wild to consider. So a lot of this year has been staffing up. We've been calling the theme 0 to 1. What are the teams that haven't existed that need one person? What are the teams that have had one person but need to build a team around them? And then now we're really focused on leadership. How do we bring in great leaders who want to put their fingerprint on their part of the org, including for each of those pillars?
Yeah, I remember when you first told me that, I was in shock as to how few people were in the data team and how such a small team has been able to accomplish such amazing things. So now taking a look at your role, look, obviously coming in as global head of data for one of the most well-known social media platforms in the world is not without its challenges, should I say,
Yeah.
but also very exciting.
Yeah.
What do you love most about your new role at Reddit?
It's hard to pick one thing. I'd say that there's a couple things that I'm incredibly excited about. And something you and I actually talked about before the call right now was that right now in the world, there are certain things that are energy draining. 2020, COVID, everything that's going on right now, these things can be a little energy draining. One of the things I love about my job is the areas that bring me energy. And the areas that bring me energy are things like, you know, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and OpenAI all used Reddit's data set to train their premier text ML models. So the best models in the world on chat and on text have been trained off of Reddit data, including by companies that rightfully brag about their own data sets. We have the best conversational data set in the world, and that is an acknowledged thing in the industry. That's incredibly exciting to be a part of. And I think about the value we haven't even really begun to tap out of that data, and that brings me energy. Another thing is about the team. We brought people together, at Reddit under the pretense that why we are here is to bring community and belonging to the world. One of the sort of funny things about Reddit is our user size versus our monetization is no comparison. Our user size has been massive and our monetization came way later. The company was entirely focused on how we build community for a decade of its life, maybe even more. And so when I think about that, I think about people who sincerely care about our users and care about the kind of experience we're creating. And we're not cutting corners to just drive dollars. We are thinking about how we create a great place, and then how do we create a business that supports that place? How do we create a business that makes it possible to have this environment to help bring community to people? And when I think about what's going on in the world right now, it's never felt more important to offer new ways for people to connect and share with each other.
Thank you for that, Jack. Looking at the actual project roadmap ahead, because clearly a big part of what you're trying to do is staff out and build these new teams that don't yet exist. What stands out to you as being particularly exciting that you can take Reddit from where they are now and move it forward?
I think I could tell you a list of things within each of those pillars that are huge. I'll try to be brief so I don't get breathless on the topic, but really ranges everywhere from we're scaling an organization that we think can be incredibly successful at our mission. And in order to scale that, how do we put data in the hands of people, everyone in the organization who needs to make decisions in a way that they can really leverage that to feel confident? And so part of it is an internal story. What are the kind of tools that we need to build internally for people to be incredibly successful in any job that they take at Reddit? Externally, I think about the experience we can create for users to make things feel really personal. Right now, we put a lot of onus on users to find the things that they love on the platform. So there are amazing communities, but a lot of Reddit actually sort of sneakily ends up being word of mouth. That finding out a friend of yours is also on Reddit and they found this one community that they really love. And so you hear about it that way. What are more systematic ways that we can help people who are new to the platform or people looking for something else find their people? And so we're investing a lot of time, effort, and energy in thinking about the ways that our ML investments will materialize and making it really easy for people to find their people, to find their content. And so I think people will see major changes next year on that. And obviously with that comes every platform is thinking more about video. We've seen a natural rise in video content all over the platform, all over all community types. And so we're thinking, do we have the right ways of thinking about how we support that? Do we need to think about other surfaces? So for example, RPAN, something we launched last year, which allows live broadcasting, that's sort of been a runaway success in some ways internally, where we had this idea of, will people just want to broadcast what they're doing? RPAN was Reddit Public Access Network, sort of as a joke that it was going to feel like the old school 1980s public access television. And it just is blown up. People love broadcasting anything they're doing, from people knitting to a band playing in someone's basement during these times, to a guy yesterday just got in a Deadpool outfit and did a core workout. And there were 15,000 people watching and commenting on it. And he was talking back to them. It is a very different media type. But again, how do we connect people when they can't leave their houses? It's something that we're really interested in and we're finding interesting ways to interact with.
The flip side to that, what keeps you up at night? What are you most concerned about? What are the biggest challenges ahead?
Yeah, I think that with ML, it would be easy. In some ways, it would be easy for us to drive engagement up massive numbers. There are known, understood ways to drive engagement. And a lot of those patterns are incredibly problematic. There's a healthy amount of academic research and journalism on the topic of how certain platforms have driven extremism and have actually gotten people down pretty dark paths. And so I think one of the things that we're thinking a lot about is not just how do we blow the doors off engagement. Okay, that is fine, but we're talking about creating communities, and we really want this to be positive for people, positive sense of belonging. And so we're trying to think a lot about how do we materialize this in a way that isn't dangerous to people, that isn't going to drive net negative societal impact, because it seems like a lot of companies in the industry have done that, have built businesses on the top of practices that have turned out to be incredibly problematic at a incredibly deep and wide scale. And so that is something where we're not willing to make that trade-off. And so we're putting a lot of our time, a lot of our effort into making sure we do that the right way. Otherwise, I'm just thinking about balancing excitement versus the fact that it's a lean team. There's so much stuff that we want to do, and we need to scale into it, and we're so excited to do it. But there's also that, I said I don't want to get breathless before. We could easily do that. We could say, my God, there's 75 things we could do right now that could change, could change lives for people who use the product legitimately. That could change the trajectory of the business. And how we prioritize those things, how we be thoughtful about those things is really important so that people can live a healthy lifestyle while they work for us.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I know we could probably do a series of podcasts to talk about the various projects that you're going to work on in the future. But let's stay on the point of teams, because
Yeah.
you've got a lean team. There's a lot of growth ahead. Give us some insight. What types of people tend to be the most successful on your teams?
I think that the people who tend to be most successful on my teams and at Reddit are people, there's a couple attributes I think about. One is about wanting a sense of ownership. I want people who don't see problems as someone else's problem. I want people who see Reddit as an experience, as part of their responsibility. We are shepherding an experience for our users, and everybody needs to feel ownership over that experience and over that platform. And so people with a strong sense of ownership tend to do well. But with that, there's humbleness. I don't necessarily think that ownership has to come with attitude. I think we always want to be humble, that we know, there's plenty of other people who know more than me out in the world. And I don't mean that's everybody on the team. I mean me personally. I'm surrounded many times by smarter, more talented people in a lot of different ways, and that's great. That's how we make a great team. That's how we come together. But people need to understand, how do other people bring value? What can I learn from the people around me? And what is my role in lifting up the people around me with some of the things I know, rather than sort of using those things as a way to keep people away? So I'd say humbleness and the attitude about the investment in the people around you and the team are absolutely critical to be successful with us. And look, that shouldn't be a surprise. When I'm talking about community, and that's what we want to bring in the form of the product that we put into the world, if we can't feel that internally, how could we possibly produce that in the world?
Yeah, I think that's good for future Reddit people to hear. So on that point, and last question from me.
Sure.
Thinking ahead, thinking to the people that you're going to be speaking to for the rest of this year and into next year, what are your favorite interview questions? What do you like to ask people when you're having the conversation to learn about them, their approach, and what they can bring to your team?
So two of my favorites sound simple, but I find out a ton about a person from this, which is, what does a good day look like for you, and what does a bad day look like? It leaves a lot of room for people to think about what that means for them. And I learn a ton about a person's values and the things that they focus on by how they respond to that question. And then a related idea is, what is a good environment where you think you could be really successful, and what's an environment you might struggle? The behavioral interview questions are great. Sure, certainly use those, everything else. But I want to hear somebody be able to articulate what it is that they want and what brings them joy, what brings them energy, versus the things that they find really challenging that they don't want to deal with, because that can help us both understand, is this going to be a place where you're going to be happy and successful, or is this maybe not the place for you, even if you're great? And so I love those questions.
So do I, and I think it's great to hear the thought process behind it. It's also going to help people who maybe interview with you in the future. They know what to prepare for. Jack, this has been really fun. I appreciate you coming on, talking to us about your own background, which is great insight, giving us some details as to the team at Reddit, all the exciting things in store. We really appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for having me. This is a great program. I was happy to receive the invite, and happier still to be able to spend the time with you. Thanks, JP.
It's our pleasure. Thanks, Jack.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.